Yeah. Okay. Let's get some music going here, I guess. Okay. So, where have we been is the question. Okay. So we decided to actually use the PHP unit XML, as you can remember. And the problem with that is we get the session start problem. So that has a lot to do with how std out works, right? Let me actually make that music is a little bit loud on my end. Oops, not what I wanted to do. Okay, so you guys have to tell me if that's the right kind of volume, because I basically handle that differently on how I hear it and how you hear it, and I'm not a DJ, so I'm not sure if that is, you know, the right kind of volume for you guys. Anyway, let me quickly send a message to everything. Okay. All right. Now, let's jump in. So, what we see here is basically and let me actually go this to the code mode here. So what we see is that basically we still have the session start problem. So the first thing that we want to do is to change the to DT out to deter out. Let me actually correctly Google how to do this. Let me quickly Google how to do this. std there. Yeah, we want to stdir. Okay, so that's basically what we want to do. Let me see if that's correct. Yeah. Okay, so the reason why we're doing this is a pretty simple one. We don't want it to go to std out, so this is not an issue. And if we do that, then we of course get all the includes that are any kind of echoes and so on. So if we run it now, then as you can see, we see a lot of stuff going on here, which is of course a problem because the only thing that we really want to execute are the tests themselves. So here in our directory, let's see what the problem is, right? So what do we have here? We have the info that we don't want to use. We have the install that we definitely don't want to use. Oops, it's even a little bit of danger here. We have our index in that case that we don't want to install. And we have our startup. Actually, the index we can include. This shouldn't do anything, right? Yeah, that should be fine. Okay. No, it's the other way around. Need more coffee. So the index we want to include, the startup we want to be included, and then not like this app. That's super important. Not like this PHP. Okay, let's give this a shot. Okay. And that looks better, doesn't it? So 2 tests, 3 assertions. That is all looking great. Okay, so we passed our tests, which is fine. Let's basically see what happened here. So at this point, we basically assumed, okay, that get topics is an array, and that the array has key. It has a key of 0, so it must have at least one value in here, right? Which we have fulfilled here, right? I mean, we could basically see, hey, is this really true, right? So let's make just one. I mean, this does not make sense in the logical field, but what I want to say is just to let you know, assert same. So let's just say set error, right? That's what's expected. And then our actual is then topics 0. Just so you see how an error output looks like. Right? And here you see, okay, so expected was set error, and the actual was set error warning. Right? Click to see difference. I don't really need to do that. And you can basically see, okay, whoops, there are 2 tests, 4 failures, and 4 assertions, and 1 failed. Okay, so now this test didn't really run through. We now basically have the knowledge that this doesn't work anymore. But again, this is a very strange scenario. We wouldn't normally have to do this. But what we would have is to basically say, okay, if we make any kind of changes here, so let's just say this is now part of our testing suite, right? So that's all fine and dandy. Those tests run, and they seem to be doing fine. And of course, the test construct is kind of useless to us right now. So what we really want to test here is whether or not this view is a string, right? That's probably what we want to do here. So here, let's say, okay, in our test construct, what we want to do is the following. First thing to check is is view set and a string, right? So we basically say this assert is string, right? And then here's the actual. So is our instance view. There's another string. And then actually and then the next thing that we want to check is now if we got the topics. Oops. Then we basically say assert this array, and then the actual is instance. No, not topics. Oh, we have that in here, right? See, we can test for this right now. So that's the interesting part about test-driven development, where you say like, wait a second, is this how you actually want to write it? Right? Because so the idea here is to say like, well, look at this code, right? So either this topics is something that I lift up, which would make sense, right? And in that case, I would basically say, okay, let's look at this. I could either do this here, right? In which case I bind this directly, and that's cool if I'm lazy. Or I basically do it the other way around and say like, okay, this is, well, in that case, public, because we're going to see how we're going to test private entities, but public, and we say topics. Actually define that as an array. And we don't define that at all in that case. And here, instead of get topics, we're going to say set topics. And then we're going to say this topics equals. Now, the only thing that we're really going to do here is to say, okay, so this has to happen in our construct. And then here, we say this topics. Okay? And this tells me that I should make that type safe. And that makes sense, I guess. That's a you know, like in PHP, what you can do is you can make things typed or not, right? I can do stuff like this, and that would, for example, say that this function represents. Actually, let's even add that, because that's an interesting topic. Doc block and declarations. We want to add that to our topics. We want to add that to our topics because it makes your code very clean to work like that. Now, our test will now fail, right? If we actually do this anyway. Let's do here our topics. So if I actually run this, I get failures here, right? So advanced test, test get topics, this is what fails, right? So this runs now. This runs fine, but here's the problem. So first of all, this doesn't exist, right? And we don't really need to do this anyway. So the way we would test this is, let's see if this is an array. And do the same here. And now it makes also more sense, right? Because now we say, okay, so an array, okay, we assume that to be true. But now let's see if it's also filled, right? So if this actually filled in what we wanted it to do, right? So if I run it again, we can see everything is fine. And our tests have, I don't know how easy that is to see, right? So to test for assertions, all of them were okay. That is cool. And that's basically everything we want to check on here. There's really not that much else that we need to test for. The rest will be end-to-end testing, but that's nothing we need to be worried about right now. So why do I write tests in the first place? Right? So this is, of course, something where you say, okay, now imagine something changes. So I'm happy with this for now, and this is going to be my version 1. But then eventually, I'm going to do something like, hey, this is now, dynamic. I'm going to read that from post and say, actually, I'm going to have the post model and then say find. And in that case, anything, right? So that's going to be fine, right? So just imagine this to be something that actually runs. Now, let's have a look at how that would look like, right? So localhost PHP basics, and then we go to advanced. So as you can see, I might wonder, something apparently is wrong with my post finds, but what is it? Right? So if I actually run the test, then I get a, this works because it's not a, I have to check if, hold on, array has key 0. That's actually still true, ironically. Ironically, that's still true. So the actual problem that I produced here is that, of course, this is now an array of associative arrays, right? So my test isn't actually quite good enough. So what I actually have to do is to make sure that if I really want to test this, then this is the wrong one. What I want to make sure is that come on, assert is string, and then I say this instance, instance, come on, instance topics 0, topics should be strings. Okay. Okay. And as you can see, one failed. And what's the problem here? Topics should be strings. Okay. So now I basically see what the issue with this is. Okay. So how do I fix it? Right. So if I say, okay, well, can't I somehow map that? Array map. Right. So then here's my callback, and here's my resulting array. So in my callback, what I'm going to say is function. And I don't know if you write JavaScript, but what I can do here is basically like this will have the current iterator, right? So I'm going to call this post. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say post name. Return, sorry, I'm thinking too JavaScript here. Return post, and this post name or title, I forgot. Let me quickly see. Whoops. What's happening here? Oh. Okay. Post has title. Okay. Title. Okay. Let's see if that works. Okay, that works. Cool. So now apparently that is a name. Let's now see how that looks like. There we go. Right? No, that is actually stuff from the database. Wonderful. Wonderful. but it's just to play around, right? In reality, I actually want this to be our static topics here for now. And I'm basically happy with that. Okay, so we're basically now done with the testing. So the only thing that remains to be open remains to be a topic. The text is readable. Well, thank you very much. I tried to switch that over a little bit and enhance quality. There's actually something more. I mean, tell me what you think of this. Hold on, this is going to be insane mode here. 4:4. Bum. How's that? Anyway, so what we want to do is to basically say, let's have a deeper look at what's happening here. So I already told you that you can write stuff like this. Yeah, I know it's not showing it full screen. That's literally, like, as you can see, I have space here. I have yet to see, let me see. Let me explore the options here. How's that? How's that? I mean, if that's not readable, then I don't know. I mean, it's basically only fits 10 lines of code. Anyway, so no, it's text for giants. It's super readable. Yeah. Okay, so let's first clean this up. So we don't need the DB and we don't need the model here, right? And what we have now is to basically say, okay, what does this do if I look at it? And you probably heard of the term doc blocks already. So in my IDE, I have this little helper that basically tells me to say, hey, can you kind of write that automatically, right? And I just say, yeah, do that for all. And now let's walk through what's actually happening here, right? So here I basically see, okay, this is class advanced and it uses controllers, right? Which is something that of course I could navigate to now if I wanted to. But let's go back to advanced and say, okay, this is a class definition. Then we have a couple of public affairs here, right? So here's my array. So before PHP 7, I think it was 7.2, there was no such thing as writing types here. But I could have IDEs understand how that works, right? That must be an array. And nowadays, I can simply basically type it and say, like, yeah, this is an array. Make sure that this is an array. And so whenever it is not an array, I basically get warnings in my IDE that would actually show me how where the problem lies. So that's pretty cool. Then here, advanced constructor. Okay, that's really not that interesting. And this doesn't do anything because it doesn't return anything, nor does it. It doesn't know what to do with this. So here I need to basically say that myself, right? And say, okay, sets public topics. So what you can see here is that I have basically said, okay, what kind of function is this? So I have this little colon here, and then basically say it's void. So if I were to write array here, see what happens, right? So I get a little kind of an error. There's a missing return statement because it's. So if I say, okay, return boo-boo, it's still an issue, right? Because it knows that no, this function is supposed to return an array. So if I were to say, well, let's return an array, then you can see, okay, the errors are gone. Okay, this is now what this function does. Now, again, this function doesn't really do that because I'm going to read this topics from our class variable. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, no, this function is void, right? It doesn't really do anything. And that is always true for the constructor. That's why it's kind of pointless. So the constructor cannot return anything, at least not in the sense of where you can actually read it. But nonetheless, a return type declaration is not even allowed. See that in the constructor? And the reason for that is because that's not what it does. What it actually does is of course, like the constructor return is part of returning an instance. So somewhere else in my code, in our case in the index or in the route, we are returning the index after the instance after running this constructor. So this is basically like a before hook, if you want so. And yeah, and that's basically how we can easily structure a code to make it very, very maintainable and readable, right? So if we go back to our advanced, then we can basically see, okay, we're basically done with everything that we wanted to do, right? From our perspective here. And that basically concludes it. So what you can do from here is you can use this structure. I'm going to push this up. Let me actually leave the and then wait. Yeah, exit all of that stuff. Okay. What you can actually do now is to use this as is, right? To completely create your own functionality. And I'm super open to ideas of how that could look like. Because you can rapidly now generate any kind of application with following exactly this pattern here. The only thing that you have to do is you have to write your own controllers and you have to write your own models, right? And that's basically it. And of course you want to write your own views. And that's all you need to do. So here's your boilerplate. Let me update that in the README maybe. Let me see if that's okay. Framework less framework, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that will do. That will do. Let me just say like, okay. So we have our, what do we have here? About, I don't even need to add that. That's going to be fine. That's going to be fine. Let's just push it. So advanced endpoint and unit testing. Okay, so let's do that and then quickly go here. Yep. And say bump. Yeah, in that case, there are no additional things I want to do, and there you go. Okay, so that's basically it, right? So that is basically the from scratch method of actually doing things. And now we're basically ready to say, let's build cool apps. So if people have ideas, let me know. I'm definitely going to, on the next one, jump into and see how we can basically do that whole process in a even easier way, and in a more advanced way too. So next time we're going to jump into using a framework and looking into how that actually would work and how that would speed up our development process. And then we're also going to naturally look into the more full stack approach, right? And let's try something with time zones. Haha, lol. Yeah. For example, right, a simple times zone calculator would, for example, be something that could be useful for well, for anybody, I guess. And that's easier than you think. That's easier than you think. So the interesting part of stuff like that is the client, not so much like calculating between different time zones. But so if you have somebody visiting your webpage from, I don't know, from Europe, and something is supposed to be scheduled with somebody from California, then the interesting point is, of course, to say, okay, so if that somebody now says 7 p.m., how is it stored on the server, and how is it presented to the guy in California, right? So to calculate with local times, and then basically use a standardized time. I mean, I set my servers always to GMT or UTC 0, and calculate from there, because however you do that, you'll have problems anyway, right? And that's just a problem if you then have to calculate, especially when you go across the dateline. So having your server set up at 0 is always the easiest solution to say, okay, from there I can calculate the any kind of time span in the easiest way. You had some ideas with time zones of Silverflow stream? Yeah, let me know. Absolutely, let me know, and we will definitely then jump into it. Just as a small introduction to the power of what we're going to do. So let me actually do a new project here quickly. Wait, what's going on here? What did I do with my view? Oh, that's like this now. Hold on. What the hell happened here? Whoa. Okay, that's so not what I wanted. Kind of lost my... What the hell? Do you see that? Wow, is that strange. So let's call this Neo and 3 TV. So just to quickly show you the absolute power that we can basically unleash when we do this CLI based. Where did my browser go? Right there. So let's say we want to go to, we're not even going to do it that way. We're going to do it completely in the project. So I'm going to start with, as you can see, this is a completely empty project. Right, do you see that? And what I am going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal. And what I'm going to do is to say, okay, new n3, new app, new n3, TV. Now it's going to take a second. Bum. Okay, now we're running Composer. So everything has been done automatically. And now I say, okay, Neon3, develop. Okay, so let's have a look at what this generated. Right, so now we have a complete setup of, here are components, our frames, our models. A lot of that will look familiar to you. And if I now visit this localhost, which I cannot predict in which browser when it will open here, then you can see that so this is basically running, right? This is the actual core of how that stuff works. And let's open up another one, another terminal here. Oops, my rams are at the end. Now I'm going to say Neon 3 new component test, or you know what, time zone calculator. Okay, and that's going to be a route component. I want to create a view. I want to use my demo frame in that case, and that's done. So what did we call it? Time zone calculator. Okay, which basically means I should have now something like time zone calculator. And you can see I do, right, in my components. Do you see how I have a time zone calculator? Now look at how that looks like, right? It's relatively similar to what you've seen before, right? It's a little bit different, but the idea is basically the same. You've got your hooks that will be your views, right? And then you write your output. Okay, we have an init function instead of a constructor. It gives us a bit more possibilities of how particular events are handled. But in general, that's relatively easy to understand what is happening here. And let's look at the view, right? That's in that case here in the same folder. Here it's my time zone calculator. Here be content, right? Let's reload this. That's how easy it is. And we're going to learn how to work with this. Okay, yes, I just get a question. So this is no, that is not relevant, right? You can use in Windows, you can use your CMD. I'm on Ubuntu. I can use my regular terminal. I don't need this in PHP Storm, right? So yeah, you need to use CMD in Windows. That's correct, right? So I can do that too. So let's just say I quickly need to navigate there then. So that's var www.neon3 TV. What? Var www neon3 TV. Okay. Here, right? And then I can say, okay, Neon 3, new component. I don't know, let's create an API endpoint maybe, huh? First API. Yeah, that's an API endpoint. Okay. So what you basically see here is I have an API endpoint that has the get first API. Right, let's assume that. So I'm going to simply say, okay, return some answer. Right, and if I were then to say, okay, let's duplicate this and say this is actually the API.v1 first API. Oh, request is empty. So I'm actually throwing an error here because here per definition I need to have a request. Let's actually change that behavior. And then you get, okay, some answer. Right? And that's how it will work. So yes, so what you need as Silverflow Stream is a couple of things to make this run really smoothly. So the first thing is you need to have Composer for the installation process. You will want to have Git installed on your that's all fine under Windows. And what you also want to have is Node and NPM. And if you have those, then you're good to go. Then the only thing that you're potentially concerned about is Oh yeah, of course, and then you need the Neon 3 CLI, right? So that's something that you can basically check out here. Let me see. Where's the CLI? Yeah, let me post that one in here. Let me post that one. Okay. And if you dabble into this, you will notice that the speed at which you can develop is absolutely amazing. I mean, I've built complete applications within a day or two that have a super high complexity. That's basically the whole gist of it. But again, we're going to look into that a little bit. Yeah, cool. Do that and prepare something, and then because I mean there are things that when it comes to, let's maybe look at one more thing. Maybe look at one more thing where we say like, hey, I want to use particular things. So remember how we build our own user model. So what we have as a possibility is, of course, to say, hey, aren't there usable packages that others already built? And in that case, there is, right? So if I go to my GitHub and say, hey, how does my actually I want to go to really my GitHub here and say, hold on, where's my user model? Yeah. So here, do you see that? This is how I can basically install it, and can then say, hey, I don't know if you can see that, but that now installed basically a user model. So what I have, if my RAMs catch up eventually, is still running. Come on. There we go. Okay. Oops. Did this fail, or is this just so slow? Updating Neon 3 templates. Yeah, okay, that's all fine and dandy. But where's my user model? Is this because I'm using an old CLI version? Hold on. Oh, no, I want to go into the composer. What's my user model? Yeah, where is it? Oh, there it is. It's really, okay, those are just my RAMs. Wow. Yeah, that streaming takes a lot out of my computer. But okay, let's close all of this and just check something out, right? So close all and say, okay, so now I have a user model. And that's pretty cool, right? And why is it pretty cool? Well, as you can see in this project, I have no database whatsoever, right? So that's probably something that I quickly want to do. So I will, in my thing, simply create and you can do that with your, I don't know, PHP my admin, whatever you're doing, right? I'm going to generate a database quickly. And that database I'm going to be calling create database, and I'm going to call it neon3_tv. Oops, there we go. Okay, so now I have this database. Let's hook it up. Let's hook it up. It's a MySQL database. Yeah, localhost root, and database is neon3_tv. Let's quickly see. Okay, cool. I'm not interested in the collation, and I'm not interested in the user. Okay, so that's an empty one. Do you see that? Now, the user, of course, requires a particular database, right? And this is the migration that we were talking about before. Do you see how there's a migrate JSON that would tell me how that works? So in order to actually facilitate that, let's get out of this and basically say, okay, Neon 3, and sorry, I need to change this music quickly. Okay. 1 second. Now I can see migrate models up, and now I can basically say, oh, you need some kind of database, right? So yes, I'm going to say new localhost. The database name is neon3_tv. My user is root. That's correct. Port is correct. Password, yes, save that. And there's no password in mic, and done. Right. So what happened now, if I reload this, is I now have a couple of tables here. Right. You can see there's a user table, there's user email, there's user password, you know, all that kind of stuff. So all of a sudden, all of my changes to the database are taken care of for me. Right. So that's pretty cool, and there's a login that already works, and you know, all that kind of stuff. So in theory, I now have a working user model. So in my component, I don't know, time zone calculator, I can basically say, okay, can I not say user model create, and then put in my credentials directly, right? Which I don't want to do right now here. Again, we're going to dabble into how that works the next time. But there's a bunch of stuff that you can basically do to really rapidly speed up your development. And now with you know, if you watched all the other videos, you will also understand what's happening under the hood, and it will be easier to understand and get into. Yeah, so that kind of concludes it for today. And if you have any kind of questions, again, just join the Discord. So you can join the Discord. The main reason for that is not so much that you have another one of your million Discord servers that you can join, but if people write me on there, share their ideas and so on, that's going to end up in this show, or it's actually going to end up, you know, being addressed per video. You can jump in live in the voice channel and talk to me directly. Just go to the live interaction channel, and we can address your things on the fly. That's basically a little bit the idea here, right? Is to look at your code, you know, ask questions, get really like live support in the actual sense of the word. Of course, as much as my time allows. So, you know, whenever I'm online, I guess. So you guys enjoy, and thank you so much for watching.